Hi, everyone. This is Scott Martin from the Groundswell Marketing Podcast. This is episode Ground Zero, and this is the introduction podcast to introduce everybody to the who, what, why, and when, and why I started to do this podcast. And in this particular episode, I've got a good friend of mine here, Ernest Barbaric, who is going to be basically interviewing me and walking through you guys through the journey of, why we were doing this thing.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to be here as well. I mean, I've known you for a little while now. We've been in some similar circles, and I'm really glad we had a chance to connect here a couple of weeks ago, and you told me about this podcast. So I think and I also think this is a really good idea to introduce who you are, what the podcast is all about. So with that being said, this is going to be one of those really interesting podcast episodes where the host is actually the interviewee. And so thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And
you're perfect for doing it. I mean, you're the guy that started Pod Summit. You're the one that's given me all the 1, 2, 3s on doing this. So thank you so much for agreeing to doing this. This is like perfect. It's awesome.
I think it's awesome. And we're also sitting in my home studio right now. So this is the way that it looks and sounds. And Scott's got big cans on his ears, and he looks really professional with the microphone in his face. So this is going to be great.
The clown nose. It's got the big red bit back.
That's right. One of the microphones has this like red foam on it that kind of make. I don't even know why I bought the red foam, but it's just kind of interesting that one of them is red, the other one is black, which makes them kind of distinctive, so you know which one goes to which wire.
It makes it impossible to look at you because it's like so like bright.
Good. Well, so with that being said, for the folks that are listening to this for the very first time that might not have heard about your work, so who is Scott Martin?
Great question. I don't know who I am. Well, Scott Martin is basically a multi-passion entrepreneur. My background has been over 20 years, I've been in some way, shape, or form, I've been doing marketing, working in agencies, had my own agency. I've been, started several businesses. And throughout that entire span of career, the one thing that's been consistent is that it's been my commitment to basically, direct response, measurable marketing, and shift it into sustainable growth marketing. So, for me to kind of like help everyone that's listening today about who am I and why, my background that led me to this is it's sort of like a combination background of also being, the name itself, Groundswell, which is, my surfing is something I deeply love and care about and I've intertwined into my life. And it's so fitting as a metaphor for the type of marketing that I do,
right.
Which is, a groundswell is like this, something that comes from far and away and it's solid and it's, it's not fickle.
So I want to come back to this idea of groundswell marketing, sustainable marketing. But first of all, I think it would be really good for the folks that don't know you to learn more about who you are. So tell us a little bit about who you are now. There's a bit of a journey. It's not like you were just kind of became the Scott Martin that you are today. So I wanted to ask you, what's the origin story of how did you get to here?
So how far back do we want to go? I mean,
well, let's go back. I mean, you've had a really interesting history too. Right. So I mean, like one of the things that I know, you used to live in Hawaii at one point in time.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start right from like say high school because that to me is like everybody goes back to high school and they had these dreams and aspirations and I splintered off. Most of my friends, of course, went off to university and college. During high school, I basically had a VW van. I was skipping school and going windsurfing off to the lake. Like I could not get out of school quick enough to go to Hawaii. I was saving all my money. My dream was about moving to the North Shore of Hawaii and becoming a windsurfer, a professional windsurfer.
Okay, fair enough.
And so I think after a couple years of saving my money, I moved to the North Shore by myself and ended up living there for a little over a year and a half. And I subsequently went there for several winters. And my journey there was an interesting one, I'd say. It's like basically struggling with, I arrived with $800. Anybody who's been to Hawaii knows that doesn't last long. And, working under the table and really grinding it out, but living my dream every day. It worked out where I was like pretty much windsurfing every single day for a period of time, and was at a point where I was like, literally throwing loops and windsurfing in, almost mass high waves. And that was a dream come true. But that was the beginning of me really seeing the possibilities of the kind of lifestyle that I'm living right now, which has really been a blend of adventure lifestyle, nomadic living, and marketing my way around that sort of lifestyle. So from there, I guess you could say is like living in Hawaii. I moved home, and of course that was a slap in the face.
Where is home?
Calgary, Canada.
Okay.
So very cold, very opposite of Hawaii. And, and I started hustling, so basically, was working in the restaurant industry for a number of years. But what I found was that connection of my love for surfing. And by the way, when I was living in Hawaii, I really fell in love with surfing. What I was doing is I was waiting tables literally to pay for my next surf trip. So I was living in the back of a van and lived in Baja, went to Central America, went to Mexico, California, the West Coast. Like I was just traveling around surfing, pretty much work, surf. And one of the trips that I stayed for about 3 months in Central America and Costa Rica. It's a whole other story, but I chased a girl that was in the Cayman Islands who, I wanted to see, and I ended up getting deported from the island.
So hold on. Okay, what?
So I had a girl that came to Costa Rica with me. I broke up with her, and then she went to Cayman Islands, and I felt really bad. And I was like, I shouldn't have broke up with her. So I went to the Cayman Islands. When I went to the Cayman Islands, you're not allowed to look for work when you're in the Cayman Islands. And I had just been 3 months long. I had long hair, not dreadlocks, but I had long blonde hair. I just surfing. I was scruffy as can be. And I actually arrived on the island, and I started looking for work because I was I literally sold my surfboard. I had not that much money. I actually had hardly any money to just get there. Right. So I knew I had to keep working to keep, moving around. And little did I know that one of the people I was hitchhiking with was actually an immigration officer. And long story short, I got deported. And
So you got deported from Cayman Islands?
Yes.
Can you ever go back?
I don't know. I haven't tried.
You
I haven't tried. It's actually would concern me if we were to go. I'd have to look. I don't think so, because I don't think it was. They didn't really have anything on me. They didn't charge me with anything. They just said, get out of here, basically. And they strip searched me and stuff. And I was in the Miami airport completely. I had $80. It was in the Miami airport. It was the airport was shutting down. It was in the wing where the Canadian Air Canada and different airlines, and so I was kind of batting down the hatches for the night, staying in the airport, and those little airport sort of convenience stores.
Right.
In the window was this new book, just came out. It's called Awaken the Giant Within, Tony Robbins. And I'm like, you know what? That looks great. I need to do this. So I bought that book and bought a bunch of Cheetos or something, and basically almost read the whole book over the night for the evening.
And this is while you were staying on the floor somewhere in Miami.
It was actually, those really cold, uncomfortable, the round chairs that you they make it purposely so you wouldn't lie down. It's like they intentionally made it to make it as uncomfortable. Anyways, I sat in one of those things. Like there's nowhere to go to lie down. So and it was a kind of a scummy wing. I don't know why my airport had this wing for the Canadian Airlines. It was really crummy. Anyways, the morning started when the ticket booths opened, and I finished reading this book, and I was a head full of ideas and pitched first Delta Airlines that why they should. I showed my passport. I'm like, I travel everywhere. I'm like, it's like basically calling myself an influencer, going, I'll tell everyone how great you are.
So what year was this in?
Shoot, I don't know.
How many years ago was it? 10, 20?
Oh, over 20 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 20 years ago. So you're now sitting at this airport in Miami. Kiosks just started opening up. Everybody's showing up.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, guys.
I went up to the ticketing booth and went, hey, you need to fly me home. And here's why, because I'm going to tell everyone how amazing, Delta Airlines is. And I fly all the time. I'll be a loyal customer. I had this great pitch, right? And they're looking at me going, no, you're not going to fly, with us. And did the same thing with United Airlines. And I think I had the exact same reaction. But then I went to the American Airlines, and there was a Latino older guy there, and I handed my passport to show him my passport, gave him the same pitch, and stuff. And I swear to God, he just looked at me funny and just handed back my passport. He goes, Mr. Martin, you're flying back to Calgary. And I remember those words,
wow.
And I flew home. Yeah. Because I'm so about one of my biggest values has been about self-sufficiency, which was basically sustainable growth marketing. I'm like, everything is about being self-sufficient. It's because I did not want to phone my parents and say, look, I need help, right?
Hey guys, I had $80 last night and I have 40. I'm sitting in Miami.
I didn't even have 40. I had I don't know.
Enough for peanuts.
Totally didn't have anything. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you went up to all these different kiosks to say hey guys, I would love if you flew me home. I'll be your best little customer.
Totally.
And so finally American Airlines actually said, yeah, we'll get you on a flight.
The guy did. His name was Jose. And I believe it was an American Airlines. To this day, I believe that it was actually him, that he I think I was a gift. I look back on in life and it was a gift from him.
That's amazing.
So, you know, he didn't go and ask anybody. He was a ticketing agent. He just made it happen. So I kind of believe that it was actually him that got me home.
So that was one of those incredible transformational experiences, what it sounds like.
It was. And so the reason I bring that up is because that propelled me into what has now been my marketing journey. Because I arrived back in Calgary, Canada, and just absolutely like going, oh my gosh, reading books is amazing. Like, look what it could do for you. So I was always kind of into books, but not quite like that. Like that was like the thing, right? And I went back and I literally took a job working at a place called Joey Tomatoes, became a bar manager right away. Like didn't even just bartend. I was like bar managing. I was like leveling up, right? And got to know the owner, which is to this day, like the owner of Joey Tomatoes and Earl's. He only opened that one store. So it was kind of a unique opportunity to work with this guy that's like really knowledgeable and built this huge restaurant empire, right? And Jeff, he actually he had a couple marketing initiatives, and I came up with some names, and I think it was like they were coming up with this like Joey Tomatoes thing, and I'm like, well, we should call it Tommy Tomato Heads or something. He's like, you're really good at this marketing, naming stuff and whatever, right?
Right.
And he's like, I got some books for you if you want. If you're interested. I'm like, absolutely. I think maybe even I asked him for some books. So it was like Pursuit of Excellence, all around customer service that would help them with their business. But I started really reading, and my passion for reading became this insatiable appetite that I actually, through the course of those couple of years, like I read anything that I could get my hands on. That first started with customer service, but then through circumstance, got into marketing. And that circumstance was through that period of time. That was when the internet was just beginning. Like people were going, have you heard of this thing called the internet, right? And my dad said, hey, there's this broker pitching this thing called Internet Cafe, and you got to come see him. So I went and saw him. This guy's name was Cam Shell. And I was just like, I was mesmerized. He's talking about how this coffee shop, you're going to connect to the world with this thing called the internet and all this kind of stuff. And
Did
I'm
you
like,
go to the coffee shop?
Well, he hadn't built it. He was raising money for it. So it was a pitch for raising money to do this, right? But the fact that this was the future, I immediately at that meeting, I was going, oh, there's going to be like internet customer service, internet marketing, like, because I was already kind of starting to get into marketing. I'm like, this is the future.
Right.
And so I bugged that guy, Cameron Shell. I phoned him for months every week, going, asking for a job. And he finally actually offered me a position. He just kind of said, you know, like, please don't call me anymore. And I hope my dad actually knew him really well. So my dad was putting pressure on him as well. And I think he finally just kind of caved. And I ended up coming on, not in marketing, but I came on in sales. And I was selling websites, basically. And that got me really infatuated with the digital market. There's like, you know, in terms of like the development of it, like how do you get people there? But at that point in time, I wasn't marketing. I was just like selling and getting involved in the digital world and all that kind of stuff. And
so you were selling websites when websites were kind of like a fairly new thing.
Oh, and no one was online. Right. Going, you need to go on this thing called the internet, explaining what it is, why they need to do it and stuff, right? So awesome. Yeah, so that was the beginning of my journey. And in a short amount of time, I was crushing it. And he's like, you're really good at this. And in fact, he actually raised money and made me CEO of my own startup and called FutureServe. I eventually renamed it NextClick. And I had a staff of like 12 or whatever. And it just absolutely blossomed in this incredible period of time when the internet was just exploding.
So I just want to point one thing out here. So you were a random kid with long hair at a Miami airport, gets a flight back from American Airlines, starts working at Joey Tomatoes, gets promoted to bar manager, then moves into this other opportunity, and now all of a sudden the person that owned this internet cafe, which turned out to be like a place that would sell websites and stuff.
Well, no, actually, he didn't end up doing the internet cafe.
Yeah,
ironically,
he built this.
He built a technology company called FutureLink.
And then he's like, "Hey, what do you think if you started your own business?"
He goes, "You're doing so well. Why don't we fund you?" Because he's also a venture capitalist. He's like, "I'm going to put you in your own little business."
Okay, and then all of a sudden you had like
because they took over an ISP and they're like, "I need someone to manage it. You're the guy because you're like this keener." Like he just saw me as being, I was relentlessly keen. Like let me tell you the level of energy I had.
Well, I mean, I can even see that today, right? Like, I mean, you still have this relentless energy. You told me that you wake up at like 5:00 in the morning and start working. You hacked your sleep so you can get up and so you're ready to go. I think that's amazing. There's not very many people that do that.
But I think everyone wants to do it, and here's why I know everyone wants to do it. Name a time that in your life. So anyone that's listening, name something you love to do. If it's skiing, if it's like fishing, do you have to be told to get up at 5 a.m. to rip out and go to the lake?
Yeah, I don't sleep.
You don't.
No.
So that's why I feel so passionate about marketing. That's how I feel about it. Like, I legitimately love what I do. I love marketing. Like, it's like no word of a lie. Like, I love it. Like, you know, and I love surfing too, but it's like, you know, so I feel like it's a gift.
Yeah.
And that gift is giving me this insatiable appetite to keep learning, right?
That's amazing. Yeah. And so, I mean, of course, there's this also background of having that transformational book and then really getting into books and learning as much as you can. And so I think it's also kind of interesting because you went from this almost like so that Awaken the Giant within this self-development thing, then you went into customer service, then marketing, and now startup. And so when you started a startup, when it got funded, you went from 0 to 12 people within a very short amount of time, or what was that like?
It was crazy. I mean, but it wasn't weird because everyone else that was in the internet was having the same growth. It was everywhere, right? And I just happened to be hitching my wagon to some venture capitalists that were actually able to raise a lot of money and stuff. So the cool thing was what their growth and the things that they were doing. They're down in Silicon Valley. They're doing big plays. And I got a little bit of coaching from them in terms of like what they were doing. And one of the things that he did was he started a consortium because the industry was just starting.
Yeah, this is the very beginning of anything that anybody would even call internet marketing now.
Exactly. So he worked with a PR firm down in Boston, Massachusetts that helped him form a nonprofit group for application service providers, ASPs.
Okay.
So, and I saw what that did. It totally put him at the epicenter of the whole industry, guiding the regulations and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, like sort of parallel to that, I fell in love with this idea. I saw Don Peppers, he's an author, speaking for TELUS about his book he just released called One-to-One Marketing. And I went, it was that same lightning rod moment like I had when I saw Internet Cafe. I'm like, one-to-one personalization marketing, that is where the internet's going to be, being able to do personal one-to-one interaction.
So that was another big insight.
That was. And so what I did was I poured everything I had into learning every technology, all the people, all the players. And I came up with this idea to start the personalization consortium because the really cool thing about, well, not cool, but the very lucky thing for me was that it had a lightning rod issue, which is privacy. And so there was a real need for these companies like back then DoubleClick, one of the largest ad networks, you know, stuff in different groups. And so what I did was I followed his model of ASP and I started the personalization consortium. And I basically got Don Peppers to be the chairman of this group, convinced them because I brought around me the right people, and we brought in, and we actually launched. We had American Airlines, United Airlines. Ironically, isn't that funny? Ironically, those two airlines came on board. DoubleClick, Net Perceptions, like we were the player for basically ethical information management. So regulating ourselves, the industry self-regulating to kind of basically allow the industry to blossom. And of course, now I see all the privacy issues. I have a whole different opinion about how that is. But at the time, I was so enamored with the potential of being able to service customers. So it was sort of the blend of giving this incredible customer service and really intelligent marketing that was measurable. And that was that journey. And what that had me doing, because I became the president of the organization because I started it. Yeah. And I was way over my head. But I was flying around the United States doing tours, speaking in front of like 500, 800 people around personalization and the benefits and personalization consortium, why they should join or support it or whatever. And so that had me all over the US at all the internet conferences. And also because of that, I was actually got the back door into all these conferences and more learning and contacts and stuff. And it just was amazing. And then the .com crash came.
Yep.
I remember that well. That ended like that was such a thump, right? And
so kind of riding this wave of these awesome new technologies. And it really seems like that seems to be like a common thread, when I'm listening to you tell the story about being at the right place at the right time and kind of catching that wave in all of these different big things that were coming. And then the .com crash happened. So that was 99, 2000, right? No, that was 2000, 2001.
2001, yeah.
After the Y2K.
Yeah, probably the if there's something to glean from it, it's the right place, right time, but it's probably this, acting on it. Mm-hmm. That's the thing is how many people probably saw something coming, but they didn't act on it?
Yeah.
I definitely act on stuff, right? And so I was acting on it. Like once I feel it, I'm like, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to just do it.
I even see that even right now, the way that you're operating on Instagram and stuff, it's I've been in marketing for over 12, 13 years now, and the things that you are doing are very innovative. They're very kind of cutting edge. You do a lot of what you call growth hacking. So there's some really awesome things, but that seems to be another consistent thread, is like getting on top of some really cool new stuff and then mastering it and figuring out a way how to actually use it to grow a business and do this kind of marketing that's relevant and on the cutting edge.
Totally. But cutting edge for me is like what is beyond, like not just like what's new. It's like what's going to be mainstream, what's going to work, what works and what's sustainable and what's measurable and stuff like that. So that's been kind of like that whole personalization was really sort of honed my skill around that whole measurement and sophistication and all the potential in and around that connecting from mass to personal.
And so what happens after the .com crash? I'm kind of curious about that.
So .com crash happens, and I wanted to flee my agency because, of course, we had spent all this money because we were doing like flying around and like we were doing. So we had trade show booths. Like it was like we were spending money because my investors were telling me to. They were going, go, right? And so I was gonna obviously take a job right away, and then my dad said to me, he goes, there's a lesson to be learned by just be the last guy there. Deal with the receivers, he goes, it's a lesson you'll never it's a lesson it's like one of those lessons you can't buy.
Right.
And to this day, what a great lesson it was dealing with people who are really angry about the fact that I spent money that I didn't have. Really gave me a lesson. Like I was the last guy there. I made sure I spoke and dealt with, and in fact, I even went public in the Globe and Mail and the local newspapers about what went wrong and went down. It was one of the very few .com companies that was just like transparent about it.
That's awesome.
Because I decided to embrace it. And and that was at first I was really fearful of it. And in the end, it ended up being one of the best things I ever did. But because, like in hindsight, it's actually success. It's helped me. That salty taste has helped me avoid it. But it's also let me really understand that I think the universe, people, and the business community, we all understand that there's things that happen or things that go wrong. But when you try to like mask it and pretend that things are great, it's like you just get punished for it because you're not authentic. But when you're just totally like going, this is what I did wrong, it really gave me a lesson in business overall of just like almost like accepting failures and communicating the failures. And that's what I hope that some of this podcast is going to be is there's tons of marketing experiments that have worked and there's way more that have not worked.
Right. Well, you don't hear about them as much.
You don't hear about them.
People usually just kind of like put them away somewhere where nobody will hear it, nobody will see it. That's why we see a lot of dead accounts, for example, for some brands, right, on these random platforms.
Totally. Well, and I'll take a left turn here. It actually is one of those things that really annoys me about marketing is the marketing industry is they showcase these case studies and they're unattainable for the everyday entrepreneur business because they don't explain and they don't amortize the ROI of what all the mistakes it took to budding up to that one perfect case study. They actually aren't including that. So they create this great ROI and it's just not achievable.
It's not real.
Or it's not real. So what I'm hoping to do is to kind of really the underbelly of that and share that struggle that you have to go through and embrace it and show that that's actually part of the journey. You know what I mean? And stuff. So I think people always go, well, like we're going to share the failures to, to really uphold the great. I'm talking more in-depth detail even on some of the tactics of like, this took 3 years. I have a couple hacks that have taken me years to figure out.
Right.
So really, if you were to do it the same way I did it, the ROI is terrible.
Right.
But I'm going to save you all that time because you don't have to deal with all these things I failed,
I did
right?
the 3 years. You don't
have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping to impart. And that's what the people that I'm going to bring around are going to be able to do that as well, right?
That's awesome. So I want to come back to that too. So bring me back to now.
Okay.
.com
crash.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the beginning of my agency career because
I want to hear about this.
Because up until then, it was more around internet technology and it was an agency background. And in Canada, there's a show called Dragon's Den. There's a person named Arlene Dickinson that was on it. And she actually approached me to buy the company and it wasn't really viable. So she wanted to actually me to come aboard to be her number two. And at the same time, the owner of Critical Mass found out that I was, available to work.
Recently available.
And she had taken her time to make an offer to me. And to this day, I felt really bad, and he totally like scrambled the jets and moved me. He goes, you'll be in New York, Boston, Chicago. He goes, and we have this portfolio because the reason he really wanted me to come aboard and help do business development and be the vice president of CRM was because they had a Nike ID, which was this huge account of doing these Nike customized shoes. Procter & Gamble had the Reflect product, which was customized makeup. They had this configurator, I think, with Mercedes-Benz, and they had these other projects. So it was really personalization centric.
And it's also, just to mention for people that might not know Critical Mass, Critical Mass does big, massive projects. This isn't a little agency that does little things here and there. They work with Mercedes, BMW, with like all of the big brands.
There's like probably about 10 digital mega agencies that are kind of like really on it.
Yeah.
They're one of them.
And the other thing that I know is also doing like a tour of duty in Critical Mass. Basically, once you've done that in the marketing world that kind of we're both in, you're like, that's an alumni. That's like graduating from Harvard sometimes, I find, like with people that are like, oh, you were a Critical Mass. That's awesome. Okay, so you ended up going there.
So I had to turn Arlene down. She was, of course, not happy about that. And I really feel bad about it. But Ted just gave me the offer of the century. And so again, I'm on planes. I'm flying down to New York and I'm pitching. So I learned my skill on how to pitch, on the strength of the brands that they built. And I learned about process. I learned about some really good business acumen, pitching, and got into the door and was pitching like J. Crew, Avon, Kenneth Cole, big fashion brands,
Right.
so really leveraging the fashion stuff, and was just actually really making great headway. Big time, and really getting excited about just the size of accounts I was getting into, because they're going, look, if it's not over $500,000 type of strategy marketing program, we don't want to do it. So I had to really hustle, and I didn't mind, because of course I was just flying down in the U.S. and then 9/11 happened.
Right. Wow. Okay.
9/11 happened. A week later, I got a call, and they said, we're going to cut your contract because there's no business going to be coming in out of the United States for a while. So I was like, literally like went, over.
Wow.
And it ended, and it was really devastating, because I was just really starting to I felt once again, it was like, just like the next click, it's just starting to take off, hitting the 11th hour, and same thing here. And just really took the wind out of my sail. And at the same time, actually, I think a month later, I ended up going through a divorce. So I became a single dad pretty quick with 2 kids. So it was a pretty big transformational time. I ended up working on contract with a group down in Washington, D.C. that was one of the board members of the Personalization Consortium.
Right.
Selling, and it wasn't really a good fit for me, but I was selling, to large organizations, their personalization B2B platform kind of stuff, because it was like, again, a good fit. And I got a local agency in town called Rare Method. A friend of mine, Mike, who knew me, goes, hey, you should do business development with us over here and help us. And I did, and I ended up doing that for almost a year, and was bringing in pretty sizable brand accounts like Air Canada and stuff that I was bringing to the table. But unfortunately, the style of the business was really frustrating to me, because they were really just their way of the way they wanted to go up a business. I just decided to leave. I wasn't really in tune with my values. Okay. And I told Mike when he was leaving, if you ever leave, call me, because we should do business together. Because we were the ones that were towing the rope for a lot of new business there, and it was going away because of just the way that it was being managed. So I think about a month or 2 later, he called me, and he goes, yeah, I'm done. And within a week, we actually printed business cards. I think we went to Staples and printed really kind of business cards. And within 2 weeks, I think it was not even 2 weeks, we had Sears Canada, Calgary Flames, and one of the accounts we'd lost, Future Shop. And we were off to the races. And so that was a 10-year business that we did together. The premise of that business was around, it was called Strategic Marketing Group, SDMG. And it was around focusing almost primarily a very different niche than agencies. Agencies were so focused on brand and what I felt was inflated billing. We were focused on things that could be measurable. So it was direct response marketing. So if we couldn't measure it, we wouldn't do it. So we went in, for 9 years, I had HBC. Didn't lose the account. They went through 3 different agency changes, 2 ownership changes, I think even. You know what I mean? And we had Best Buy, Future Shop, WestJet, Sport Check. Like, I worked with major retailers. I've definitely had my share of doing everything from contests to building a loyalty platform, to the loyalty company and selling it, to direct response marketing, like print, and then migrating people from print to doing online subscriptions. Like I honed all my skills in terms of like we did it all from scratch. And it's been mostly because my partner, Mike Allen, was so brilliant. He technically was capable, and he would just like anything we could envision, we would just do it. And we wouldn't even try to outsource at the time because there wasn't a lot of apps back then. It was build it your own, so that really had you get you really intimate with creating a deeper understanding of the workflow, the process, everything. And so building everything from the nut to bolt, for over 10 years with these type of programs, with these large brands, you build a pretty good capability. And, but it's amazing how fast things change. And as we're kind of leading to the end of the 10 years, the world was shifting big time. WordPress was starting to come on and stuff. And I could see that these development projects were going to kind of start going away. And we were building desktop apps, and it was like mobile was starting to come on. And so, and the thing that happened sort of parallel to that is over 10 years as being the CEO of the company, I started moving away from being a marketer. And I lost my passion for marketing. I became a little disenchanted. And I remember specifically, I think 2 years into the end of the 10 years, during the winter, there was a $200 go cat skiing in Revelstoke I saw on the internet. And I'm like, this cat skiing, I've heard of it. I heard it's really rad. I took a friend and we ended up going for 2 or 3 days, and it was like mind blown. It was like the best powder skiing I've ever done in my life. Right. And I fell in love with, I became the number one cat skiing guy. I think I spent I think I did like 10 days at that one operation, and I ended up being the number one customer at this other one. And what happened was interesting about that passion. So it reignited a passion in me, just in life. You know what I mean? I was so pumped about POW. And I was like, and I'm at the same time, another moment of time was social media came on, this thing called social media. So I'm like, I'm the CEO of this company. We're doing marketing. I'm like, and nobody in our company is even talking about. So I'm like, how can I blend this cat skiing thing into social, learn about social media? So I want to learn how to blog. I'm going to, since I'm cat skiing, I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to talk about cat skiing, and I basically think of a channel like Twitter, Facebook. I just started learning them all by actively creating content and sharing it. And what happened was, in the course of time of me doing all that stuff, is these cat skiing companies, one of them specifically was going, "You're here all the time. What do you do?" And I say, "I do marketing." They're going, "Well, would you like to trade marketing for cat skiing?" And I'm like, hell yes, And so it really, it poured. So I became this sort of side entrepreneur within my own business, if you can believe it. I was doing this
you had your
under the cloak of night.
You also had a side hustle.
Oh, I had a side hustle in my own business, right? And my business partner knew about it, but I'd be like, "Hey, I got to go," and I'd be like, because I want to get working on my content, right? So, and I really started understanding content marketing, social media. This is before it was called content marketing, right? Because I wasn't just doing social media; I was actually creating original content. And other cat skiing operations went, "Hey, could you help us?" Because I just really was able to leverage cat skiing and totally affect the business and sales with social media. I saw the power of social media right there, going, "I can't believe how amazing this is," right? And how useful it is. So that got me really involved into, long story about my heli skiing, cat skiing, surfing, all that kind of stuff. I started blending all my passions into social media and using that as a new platform for experimentation for marketing. So that's what I've been doing, and that has not stopped. I don't know how long ago that was. That must have been, 12 years ago or something, and I have maintained that. I mean, to this point now where I have different communities that I'm constantly experimenting. I have hundreds of thousands of followers in different communities. And, I have one that's just on yoga, one that's on surf art. I have the world's largest community in the world in social media on surf art, right? It's because, and that one's one experiment I did just on how can I create a community without creating any content? So I was going the opposite of me creating this original content. And I was actually going, how can I share content, start creating value? And it just blew up, right? So when we ended that business, SDMG, concurrently, while I've been doing all this content, is I've been doing so much of it. I started a new company called Laundromat Studios, which is around film, photography, and content. So I really saw the potential for the importance of content marketing. So of course, that journey over the last number of years, I was just heavy onto content marketing and then content activation. How do you create the content, map it to a sale, right? So these are all little micro journeys that I've just keep stacking on each other that's led me to where I am today. And I still have that company today, Laundromat Studios is one of the companies I have. I have another company called Swellness, which is a online wellness company. It's a subscription model business that I've launched. And my and my main company, which is Groundswell Marketing, which is why I started this podcast, which is my newest sort of iteration of all those things combined that's brought me here today, which is really around how do you combine all these sort of like tactics and strategies and do it in a sustainable way. I see the growth. In some cases, I've seen a lot of failures in terms of people spending money and they'll do stuff that creates this growth, but it's not sustainable because financially it's no ROI to it, right? Like if Facebook were to change its ad rate on certain people's businesses and all they did was Facebook ads, they'd be out of business. So I'm looking at strategies to create resiliency and sustainability for businesses because one of my biggest values is being self-sufficient. And so I feel like one of my missions that I want to impart in a lot of my consulting that I do is helping business owners, entrepreneurs, and marketers be able to create an ecosystem for themselves to be impervious to the changes in sort of the things that have happened to you. And I'll give you a very real example. I have, for example, my scottmartin.org Facebook blog on Facebook, I have 17,000 followers. I used to be able to reach 17,000 people. I reached like maybe 500 to 800. Why? Facebook changed the rules, the algorithm. That has got to piss a lot of people off, including me. And to me, it's like that is a travesty that people have invested all that money in that and building this audience. And then how dare you charge me to reach my own subscription base? Well, the reality is that is the world that we're living in. And so what I'm doing is I'm helping people navigate this, take advantage of it in certain ways, but be able to serve your own needs to be able to sustainable. And if they keep changing the rules, it's okay. You have other plans, or you leverage the way that it currently is, and it's always changing. So this world that we're talking about today, which is this, shape shifting into different social channels, some of them rise, some of them fall, some come back or whatever, is how do you navigate that? But more importantly, how do you survive, grow, and sustainably do it in a meaningful way?
Well, there's a few different things. Well, first of all, that's an amazing story background. I think that service is something that's very, very needed. Now, you mentioned the word sustainable a few times, and that seems to be, I see it in your face. That's something that you're very passionate about. So tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Yeah. So if someone, I think I get a lot of calls. People think that I'm really like a tree hugger, which I am. I'm an environmental kind of guy, but not quite. It's not, to me, sustainable in a business means, can you continue to do your business in that form, in that marketing tactic or that strategy? A lot of things that they'll do, like these case studies that we alluded to earlier on, it's not sustainable because they had it was a contest, or there were certain circumstances, or the ad rate was, they got a discount on ad rates, or they got a discount on the creative. Like there's all these things that aren't sustainable. So what I'm looking for is what are things that the everyday business can do? And it's for sure it's growth, because I know it's all about growth, and I understand how to do growth hack spikes. I do. Mm-hmm. But I'm actually not interested in giving you a bunch of tactics or hack tips to just create these like sort of spikes and then it goes away. That's not good for a business. I'm an entrepreneur at the heart. I'm a business person. I want to help them. I want them to see how they can, over a period of time, become impervious to these changes and be really like solid state resilient against economic factors, social media changes, and their business won't be harmed, or at least limit the amount of damage that could be occurred, or increase the long-term I guess you could say benefits, because sometimes there's exponential benefits if you just are a little patient and you create. Imagine if you have like your business has 100,000 email subscribers that are quite active versus 10. Well, that's what I'm focusing on, is how do you actually control your own destiny and be able to go, hey, we can reach this group on our own terms, So that's kind of the basis of this whole podcast.
So I think, it's interesting because in marketing, there are a lot of changes. And we've talked about this last time we hung out, and the fact that, for example, like Facebook changing their algorithm, that's been around for a while. Mm-hmm. We're seeing the same thing on Instagram, Twitter, and all of these different other platforms. That's just social media. So now there's changes in the SEO algorithms, in search algorithms, and who gets served what and what time. Is it by voice? Is it by location? There's a lot of different things. So I think, one of the things that I've seen business struggle with is how to navigate all of these different changes. And so, without getting into too many details, what would you say is at the core essence of the approach that you take now with all of your years of experience to help you navigate some of these changes that just keep coming?
First thing is ecosystem. So basically looking at it as in being, it's just like an ecosystem in planet Earth. It's like having an ecosystem for your business where things are in balance and there's no one silver bullet. So I'm not even saying, for example, we just talked about digital. I'm still including traditional, like radio, podcast, mail, direct mail, like whatever. I mean, good old fashioned word of mouth marketing. Like all of it's in under this bucket, and how do you navigate and work with that? So I look at it as an ecosystem, and that's the whole ecosystem that I want to describe, unveil, share, and unearth for people. Is to not. I was really one person I was talking with was really surprised to say that in this particular case of this one client, I thought radio was and they looked at me and they went, I never would have thought you would have said that. and I think it's because that people do see me as because I got so much strength in digital that I actually need to bring to bear that I don't have any affinity for anyone. My opinion would change in a moment. It's all based on what the reality of the situation is, or it could be budget, could be the type of business you're in, it could be the audience you're trying to reach, whatever it is, it's that ecosystem is very different for you. And so if anyone said that radio is in, what's that based on? You don't even know what industry or the person you're trying to reach. So to me, it's what I want to do is I want to help entrepreneurs understand that they need to create their own ecosystem based on their unique circumstances, situation, and sometimes it's just the current economic or technology climate, and sometimes it's just your audience behavior even,
And I think that's a good point to kind of bring us back to the original, I guess, essence of this particular episode and this ground zero for this podcast. And that is, now you mentioned entrepreneurs. You've also had an opportunity to work with a few really large companies. So when people are listening to the guests that you're going to bring on the show and the stories that you are going to share, who are the people that you think are going to benefit the most from this show?
So I think there's probably 3 distinct individuals that we would really, really connect with. One would be anyone that's in a marketing role. So a VP marketing manager, someone new to marketing. 2 would be an entrepreneur. So someone that's, an entrepreneur tends to be quite intimate with the business. They may not do the marketing, but they do understand marketing. And so the entrepreneur themselves, they want to be aware of it. And they want to be aware of these type of lessons or things. And the third and last would be, I don't forget who the third one. I kind of got inside my head there for a minute. I should just keep riffing, but it's entrepreneur, marketers, and
leaders. I would imagine CEOs. You think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think larger companies, but I guess it falls under that sort of entrepreneur, business owner,
right?
Or marketers and stuff like that.
So those are the people that would benefit, I guess, from it. So the other thing that I think is kind of interesting is because would you call this a podcast about marketing?
Yeah, I think marketing is going to be one of the central themes, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be specifically about marketing tactics. For example, I think that some of the things that I have learned is insights can come from unconventional places. And so I'm going to probably bring some unconventional guests that you wouldn't expect to be a marketing podcast speaker on this. And some people who are absolutely the top of the game in the industry. Like the inaugural one I'm going to do with Bruce Kasanoff. He's an amazing guy. I wrote, he's been in personalization, for years. And there's many other authors in marketing that I want to bring in. But there's also some people that are not necessarily, they wouldn't be known as marketers, right, but they've done something interesting in marketing that I wanted to bring to bear. So, so I'm looking at, and probably if there's a vein that's going to also be subtext connected, will be surfing and digital nomading and stuff like that, because I want to connect with people, and I'm naturally curious. But more importantly, I'm not bringing these people because I'm going, oh, I know what they're going to say. I'm like, I actually want to learn too with you. Right. So this is also a learning journey for me, because I'm going to be publishing a book. It's going to be out. It's called Groundswell Sustainable Growth Marketing. It's going to be out in spring of next year. And so some of these speakers I'm bringing on are actually going to be part of the research for my book as well. So I'm learning with you, the audience, and I'm going to ask questions. I'm basically making a podcast if it was the podcast I want to listen to.
Yeah.
Well, scratching my own itch, right?
That was the question I was going to ask you, right? Because there's a lot of these business podcasts. There's a lot of marketing podcasts. So what's important about this one? Why this and why now?
I think it's so important. The why now, I'll tackle that, is because there's never been a time where there's been more noise, more like tips and tricks and all these different things. And everybody's trying to like do these things. And they're all like almost these little individual, think of them like individual notes being played. this is a symphony. I want to bring it all together to be able to basically create a harmonized, strategy that works for you, and like help bring these individual tactics and then tie it together. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is this ecosystem, is like going, how does that fit into an ecosystem versus, let's talk about this one tactic, but I want to be able to play it into a bigger role of like how it fits into your overall plan.
So it's not just, one of the things that I've seen with some of the clients that I've worked with and companies that I've went to, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is they look for, a hack or something. We're like, oh, we're going to do this thing on Facebook, and then this will be the one thing, but it's not really connected to anything else. And so I really like this idea of building an ecosystem. And I think that's something that's going to be very, very important for people moving forward. And that's one of the ways that you stay resilient, I think, in the face of all these different changes. So now, with this podcast being started, and I wanted to start kind of like wrapping up the conversation here. So I think we've covered a lot of stuff here. I think this was really interesting for people to find out about. You mentioned you called the company Groundswell. The podcast is called Groundswell. So what's so important about Groundswell? Why Groundswell?
Because it just like it just evokes this, doesn't it? Just this, for me, anyways. It like, because I'm so into surfing, and it just evokes this, this feeling of something that's like swelling up, and it's like from the ground up. You know what I mean? Whether it's in the ocean floor, waves coming in, or even just groundswell. When they say like there's a groundswell movement, right? And so for me, that is the building foundation of actually audience. Like I think groundswell, what every business would love to have is an audience that's like grassroots and solid and not going anywhere. And that actually is kind of where that name kind of converges for me, is my love for surfing and this audience development and really helping businesses grow their business. So, so that's, I don't know if that's explaining myself very well, but that's, it just feels right. So
it is, like for me, what comes up is this kind of, like you said, like a very grassroots kind of a movement. And I think the interesting thing with, when you mention grassroots, there is a certain advantage that companies have that build those kind of relationships and those kind of connections. And with all the background that you have in, building relationship and everything else from Joey Tomatoes to now, there have been all these different threads, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the episodes that you're going to share. So, what are the types of things that we can expect to hear on the podcast?
I think what you can expect to hear is, you're going to get some. You're going to get some definitely some silver bullet tactics, if you want to call them that. I don't want to call them silver bullets because then it implies it's like the deal. But you're going to definitely leave with something. You're going to go, oh, I'm going to try that, But you're going to get some methodologies for experimentation. You're going to get some examples of failure to what to avoid, or more importantly, how to structure and connect your marketing. And if I could really, I'm hoping to really speak to, because I think this kind of speaks to one thing that's of value to me too, is I'm so over, because I've worked with these large companies and stuff, and how a small entrepreneur and people hail these businesses that are actually having these tactics in marketing that in fact are not really useful to businesses. They're not. They're they don't connect with you. So what I want to do is I want to kind of be the guy that's fighting for the up and coming marketer and using tools that are going to be effective for them. So I don't know if that's really making sense. I mean, for me, I don't know how to say it any more differently than, the groundswell, and my hope and intent of this is that I want to give an edge to these marketers in a way that gives them a fighting chance to be really successful long-term, not just short-term.
And to be able to compete with the big guys.
Compete with the big guys, use the tools, but use it sensibly in the sense that you're not fooling yourself. And I can't believe how many paths I'm sure people go down because they read a case study and they follow all these different things. And it's just, what I want to do is I want you to decide for yourself, but I'm going to give you the right information, hopefully, to go so that you go, oh, that won't quite work for me, but I could take a piece of that and do something with it. Do you know what I mean? No,
I love it. I think that's a really cool idea. We need. I think a lot of us as marketers, we need to hear some of the things that really smart people like you are doing, so that we can implement it as part of our business. And I think it's also interesting to share some of those stories from other people that are going to have on board to see what they've tried, what worked for them. And the other interesting thing that you mentioned, earlier was this fact that when you hear a case study, you don't hear about all of the stuff around the case study. So that's what I think you're also bringing to the table, right?
Totally. The behind the scenes,
Yeah.
what led into it. The other thing is what led to the actual decision for doing this? Like, why did you decide to do this? Like sometimes, I swear to God, I can't tell you how many times it's been an accident.
Right.
Let's just be honest. It was a happy accident as opposed to like, I'm smart. I made a good decision.
An engineered kind of.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's important because what I think that'll do is it'll free people up to start trying things and not beating themselves up about, well, because what is you can overplan. Even though I'm a strategist and I plan, people can overplan and they don't ever implement. So what I want to do is I want to free them from that and if I don't know how many, like my fiance's like, how many communities do you have? Like, she's so like, good God, man. I'm like, but I'm running experiments. Like for me, it's like, I have no fear of like trying something new and having it just like just rolling with it, trying a new channel, whatever, making a new Instagram, channel to try something in. It's because I have that I'm free of it. Right. And I think a lot of businesses are not, they're so concerned or they just don't limit themselves. They don't realize that the potential is really not in necessarily getting it perfect. It's just trying and experimenting and learning. Right. Yeah. And that process, to me, growth hacking by definition is not these tricks and tips. It's basically experimentation by changing a variable and learning from what variable worked and what didn't work and keep moving you forward. So it's failing forward.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to hear the guests you're going to have on, the insights you're going to share. I've learned so much from you already. So I'm super excited for this podcast. So in the between time from now until the next one gets published or where is the best place to find you, to get in touch with you, to follow you, to be part of this community?
Perfect. So obviously on LinkedIn, I'm Scott Adam Martin on LinkedIn. My Twitter is Scott Adam Martin. And if you just go to groundswell.marketing, that's actually where all the podcast information will live and reside. There's a Groundswell Marketing on every possible channel you can find. So it shouldn't be hard if you just do a search on Groundswell Marketing or Scott Adam Martin. You'll find me, or scottmartin.org. Yeah. Awesome.
So that was the Ground Zero episode of the Groundswell podcast. I hope they enjoyed that. I'm going to ask you, because before we forget and before we wrap it up, to actually rate this podcast, give it 5 stars. If you enjoyed what you heard so far and what you're going to hear, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. That also makes a really big difference in getting podcasts like this out in front of the right people. So thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to hear the next episode.
Mahalo.